Sorry, I'm here now. This is Nick. I had trouble finding the Zoom invitation. I see 20 people in the call. Ms. Harlos, who are we missing from the LNC?
Okay, one moment here. Let me pull up a list, and I've been marking off the alternates who are here as alternates and then who would be here as primary. So let's kind of do a roll call thing once I pull this up. Right, so we have Mr. Sarwark, we have Mr. Merced, we have Mr. Hagan, we have myself, Mr. Bishop Henchman is present, Mr. Goldstein is present, Ms. Matson is present. Is Mr. Redpath here? Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith is here, Mr. Longstreth is here, Mr. Nikala is not here, but Ms. Sexton is, as his alternate. Ms. Van Horn is here. Mr. Hewitt is not here, neither is Dr. Olson. Dr. Lark, excuse me, is here. Mr. Phillips is here. Ms. Bilyeu is here. Mr. O'Donnell is here. And then the alternates who are not in primary seats that are here is Ms. Hogarth and Ms. Adams and Mr. Ford.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Lark. I think it would be appropriate for the LNC to welcome Mr. Ford. I believe that this is his first meeting with us, and I think we should bid him welcome and good luck.
Welcome, Mr. Ford.
Thank you all very much.
And so far as guests, just so that everyone's aware, we have Mr. Thrasher and Mr. Moulton, Dr. Moulton.
All right. I'll give it another minute before we get started, but I don't want to go past 5:35.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Are we using approval voting for this?
I don't believe are we, let me sort of answer the question with a question. Is there a requirement that we proceed with a particular voting method?
No. The rules don't prescribe one, so the LNC can decide by majority vote how it wants to proceed.
Okay. But they do require a majority unless we specifically allow a voting procedure in which we don't require a majority under Roberts, correct?
Correct. And for citation, page 493 of Roberts about committee appointments specifically says with committees, majority is necessary to elect.
Okay. So we have a specific majority requirement. We do not have a specific requirement for a type of voting. So I think, that probably answers your question, Ms. Harlos. Do you want to proceed to some sort of motion at this point?
Well, no, I just wanted to give you some information is that I do have set up already an OPA vote ballot for approval voting, so we wouldn't need vote tellers. I just want the committee to know that when we're considering the options, that I have that ready to go at a push of a button. If we decide on another voting method, I'll probably need a short recess to set up a different kind of ballot.
Okay. Does anyone have a preference for one type of voting procedure over another?
I prefer approval.
Okay. Was that Ms. Matson?
Yes, it was.
Okay. I cannot recall in Zoom, are hands a thing that this does?
Yes.
I just need to find the screen that shows them to me.
Mr. Chair, may I ask the identity of a caller?
Sure, go ahead.
Who is just called in with area code 415?
Fairchild.
Thank you.
Okay. So if you open up your if you open up your participants window, if you open up your participants window, it has a hand raising button for when we want to be recognized for discussion. I believe, is there anyone who wants a voting procedure other than approval voting?
So I'm okay with approval voting, but this page text, by the way, but I don't have my computer on me. I'm on a phone. I'm on the phone call. So how do I, if Stephen and Kayla doesn't come and join the meeting, how do I vote via phone?
You don't have any access to your email?
Well, I have no computer near me. That's my problem. I'm over at my other house in Memphis instead of my house over in Huntington, where I primarily live.
Yeah, and
So
if you had a smartphone, the ballot would come to your email on a smartphone. That's what I was inquiring.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. Hold on. Let me
Yeah, as long as the website is functions on mobile, I should be fine. Otherwise, I would have the same issue as Ms. Sexton.
Okay. This is Elizabeth. Hi. For those that we know can only speak, then maybe they could be called upon to get their vote, and that would be noted.
If we use Open Vote, Ms. Harless, isn't it correct that everybody should just get an email and we go on and vote?
Yep, and they have now made it so that it's not anonymous. So I would be able to record everyone's vote in the minutes, just like any other written ballot.
Have we actually started the meeting yet, Mr. Sarwark?
I mean, I don't think I've called it to order in any particular way, but I can.
I was going to make a motion.
So now, yeah, sure. We've called the meeting to order at whatever time it is right now.
It is 3:39 Mountain Time.
Okay.
I'm raising my hand.
Go ahead, Mr. Goldstein.
I would like to make a motion for the LNC to elect the 10 members of the 2020 Bylaws Committee by approval voting through the method of the Open Vote website.
Second.
I got a second from Mr. Smith. Would anyone like to speak against? Seeing and hearing none. Is there any objection to proceeding by approval voting?
Mr. Chairman, this is a point of information. Given that we will use the OPA vote and it will be sent via email, is there a particular reason why we need to conclude the vote within the body of this meeting, or is this something where a time could be sent for, say, later this evening by which ballots must be submitted?
Yes. The answer is because there's a majority requirement. If we do not conclude the vote inside of this meeting, and if the vote results with, let us say, 7 people who received a majority, and then the next 3 vote getters did not receive a majority, it would require a subsequent action by this committee to fill in the other 3 if we had the balloting due to end after the meeting. Now, that may be an acceptable procedure to people, but it's just an FYI that that's what would happen. And that's what I was sort of alluding to when I was asking the questions about the majority procedure at the beginning. Any other discussion on Mr. Goldstein's motion to proceed by approval voting?
I will move to amend, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Redpath, go ahead.
To do away with no majority necessary. That would be my approval voting without a majority necessary to be elected. And therefore,
okay, I've heard the amendment. I think I heard a second, but I don't know who it was.
It was Whitney.
It was Whitney, okay. Ms. Mattson, since you have that citation to hand, it's in order for us to change that requirement that is underlying in Roberts. Is that correct?
There are other places in Roberts, not in the context of committees, that say it's more of a fundamental thing that can't be suspended, but if people are inclined to argue it, and I know we've had this argument before, at minimum, it would require suspension of the rules.
Okay, so it would
But
require,
I don't, yeah, but I believe it's more fundamental than that. But
do you believe it's fundamental enough that you would object to it as being out of order?
I believe
or
so.
that it requires the 2/3?
I'll go ahead and object, so then we can process the vote on it and see what happens.
Okay, well, I mean, if you believe that there's a citation, Roberts, that makes it out of order to not require the majority to add these committee members, I mean, I can just rule it out of order. I just wanted to make sure that you had fairly clear language on that. And I apologize, I do not have my copy of Roberts in front of me, so.
So there's two different citations. I have the one about committees. I'll post the one from the context of committees into the chat room. Let me do that real quick, and then I'll see if I can find the other.
Okay.
4.3. Okay, so
Mr.
there's the
Chair,
Just as, Ms. Mattson, are you still speaking, or can I recognize Ms. Harlos?
Go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Harlos, go ahead.
even with the majority requirement, if we have it so that votes are due, like if in an hour, I'm just picking times out of the air, I can always generate another ballot with the instructions that these number of people were elected, and and we can have our runoffs. I could always do that. I mean, it's not an insurmountable obstacle.
Okay, so as a matter of procedure, if we still had the majority requirement, we could get to another ballot inside of the time of this meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I could do it inside the time of this meeting, or I could do it utilizing
Outside
Sam's.
this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. The majority necessary to elect on 493 seems pretty straightforward. I guess I would ask if there's anyone in the meeting who has a good answer for why this would not be out of order, like either raise your hand or say something. Because the citation that Ms. Mattson just posted seems pretty straightforward, absent some other place where we have basically the freedom or the power to do something different. And I can't remember if we have in our bylaws somewhere put this in place for the appointment of committees because of the issues we've run into before.
How do we get to the chat room?
So at the bottom, the invite participants, share, chat, and record. So if you hit chat, and I'll just read it for the people on the phone. Alicia posted Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, page 493, regarding committee appointments, and I quote, election by ballot. This method is principally applicable to important standing committees having extensive powers. Under this procedure, nominations for committee membership can be made by any of the methods described in 46. Then the nominees are voted on by ballot, just as in an election of a board, a majority vote being necessary to elect. So it's that last clause that appears to apply to us.
And I just posted the other citation.
Yeah, the other one is page 405. Plurality that is not a majority never chooses a proposition or elects anyone to office except by virtue of a special rule previously adopted. If such a rule is to apply to the election of officers, it must be prescribed in the bylaws. A rule that a plurality shall elect is unlikely to be in the best interest of the average organization. In an international or national society where the election is conducted by mail ballot, a plurality is sometimes allowed to elect officers with the view to avoiding the delay and extra expense that result from a bit additional balloting under these conditions. A better method is to prescribe some form of preferential voting. So Roberts both contemplates something like we discussed about the delay, but suggests otherwise. I know we have changed the bylaws to allow some things that are not allowed by Roberts, but I do not.
This is not one of them.
We only changed it to allow different voting methods, but we did not change it to allow a change to the thresholds for election. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to rule it out of order, having heard nobody wanting to speak for the alternative proposition. Sorry about that, Bill and Joshua. That amendment's out of order. What we could do, we are scheduled from 5:30 to 7:30. At least that's what I blocked on my calendar. We could have the ballot required to be entered sometime during the meeting or go afterwards. And one second, I'm going to recognize Ms. Bilyeu. I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Well, I had it up before you decided that there were no objections. I think I just needed to, that's okay. Reading that rule that she posted, it specifically says applicable to standing committees having extensive powers. I realize that many people would say that this is one of the most important things we do is deal with our platform, but would that actually be considered extensive powers? And if not, then would accepting plurality here not be acceptable?
I would consider it to be extensive powers because it's the Bylaws Committee, it sets the rules for how the rest of the organization works. And so even if the Bylaws Committee doesn't have the power to spend money or do a thing, it has the power for the next 2 years to put restrictions or create options for things to be done. Basically, they set the rules. So I think it does apply.
I would disagree and say the delegates actually set the rules, but okay, I get your point.
Fair point. That they are a committee that suggests a bylaws proposal to the delegates who have to adopt it. They don't get to adopt it themselves.
Yeah.
It's a good counter argument. I'm still going to rule it out of order because I think it's simpler.
Okay. Thanks.
Ms. Mattson, go ahead.
Just very briefly, I would note that that sentence is saying that choosing to elect by ballot is the method that's generally preferred for committees with power. So it's talking about use election by ballot more so than whether or not majority is required. And we're going to do an election by ballot via open vote.
Got it.
Okay. All right, Ms. Mattson, with that, I'm going to not acknowledge your hand anymore, and we will move forward. I would like to, so we have, I believe, 47 applicants. Is that correct, Ms. Harlos? In the V3?
Let me count on how many is in here in election info. I was just informed that Joe Burns just renewed his membership, so
he's eligible again?
Yes, and there's that one gentleman I was unsure if he's eligible. I put him on the ballot, so let me see. 12, 6.7, 28, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. I have 48.
48, okay. Are you counting Francis Went only once?
Yes.
Okay. Then what I would suggest for a procedure, and I'm not tied to it, but I think it might make it go smoothly, is if we have applicants who have taken the time to join us on this call, that we give them, I would say, sorry, just looking at my watch, up to somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes to address us. And then we go through
I move
the,
to amend that to 1 minute.
it's not open for amendment yet, Sam.
Okay.
But put a pin in that. And then after that period, then we go to the committee to be recognized in order and until people are done speaking to argue for or against various members, and then proceed to the voting after. I'm going to say, I would like to get to at least being done with discussion no later than 6:45 Eastern. Do you think that will be, this would be the point at which, if there's a problem with that procedure, let me know what you think we should do differently.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Harlos.
would the opportunity for people to speak on their own behalf include LNC members who applied?
Yeah, what I was trying to avoid was the procedure in which an LNC member was the one who was basically asking for the person who had joined the call to be recognized. Because I didn't want to have LNC members call themselves out for saying, Joe Smith, I would like the committee to listen to Joe Smith. But I think if it's a short enough time period, then anyone who is an applicant should get X number of minutes at the beginning. And then from there, committee members discuss applicants.
Gotcha.
Mr. Goldstein, is 3 minutes okay?
That's an awful long time if more people show up.
It is, if they do.
And we have all their stuff already, don't we?
That is also true. And there's no penalty for people being brief and only giving supplemental information to what we've already read. But
Mr. Chairman, I would have suggested 2 minutes as an upper limit.
How does 2 sound to everybody?
I'm good with 2.
2 sounds good. Okay. Then who is Ms. Harlos? If you can.
Point of order.
Yes. Mr.
Don't we
Goldstein.
technically need to open nominations?
We will. Okay. So let's do this. Do I hear someone to nominate everyone who is in the packet?
Yes, I was about to do that.
Entitled Final Bylaws Packet V3, which is a 218-page PDF document. So I've heard a motion and a second for that.
Who motions, please?
I think John Phillips might have gotten in front of everybody else.
Thank you.
And then we'll call the second be Sam. So that's moved. Are there any nominations for anyone who is not included in the packet that was sent? Seeing no hand and hearing nobody, is there any objection to nominations being closed? Hearing no objection, nominations are closed. So now we have those 48 people in the packet have been nominated. I would then proceed in reverse alphabetical order for anyone who is on the call who would like to address the committee to speak to their application for up to 2 minutes, preferably focusing on things that they have not already said in their application. And if someone else can type this down for me, because I'm going to go through it. Sorry, I'm trying to get on my laptop where I can see both things at the same time. So I know on the call I have Mr. Thrasher, I have Starchild, I have Ms. Sexton, I have, I believe, Dr. Moulton, rather, Ms. Matson, Mr. Longstreth, Ms. Harlos.
Starchild.
I got you, Starchild.
Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Mr. Bishop Henchman. I was just checking to make sure there was nobody between Harlos and Bishop Henchman.
And Mr. Van Horn.
Is he on the call?
Duke, yes.
Okay, I did not see him on the call, but all right. So we will start with, I believe Mr. Van Horn comes before Mr. Thrasher, and you have up to 2 minutes.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
A little louder, please.
If you can.
Yes. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
It's a little better.
Okay. I'll make it very brief. Well, you've already seen what I submitted, so all I'll add in addition to that is that I hope to help the other members of any committee I might be put on to understand each other's points, realize when they're speaking past each other, or to help offer a concise summary of what someone said to other people, because I've seen people talk past each other quite a bit, and sometimes it helps for someone who's not actively arguing one point or another to offer their 2 cents and what someone means to help other people understand it, or to help notice when everybody's pretty much said everything and they're just repeating themselves. So I hope to do that so that we can spend our time more efficiently. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Van Horn. Mr. Thrasher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. We'll be brief and say that, just to reiterate, my reasoning for being on the committee would be to act as a facilitator and a mediator, to try and find common ground through the many opinions that will be found on such a committee. I have been a veteran of several conventions since 2008. I've attended 4 national conventions, so I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly, if you will. And I would certainly take the opportunity to put the time and effort to not only be part of the work that is done on this committee, but also always striving to find common ground among the committee members. And with that, I will yield my time back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Next, in reverse alphabetical, I have Starchild. Go ahead.
Thank you, Nick. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll start to be brief as well. Many of you know me. I've been an outspoken advocate of strong libertarianism and bottom-up governance, and I feel the Bylaws Committee is very key for that. In addition to hopefully considering myself, I would strongly urge members of the LNC to try to not put too many LNC members on this committee. I think serving on the LNC is already a lot of power and a huge responsibility, and I think to have people serving on multiple powerful committees is always not such a great idea. And I've said this when I was on the LNC. I think anybody serving on the Bylaws Committee should not also serve for the Platforms Committee. If I am elected, as many of you know, I'll be a strong advocate for transparency, and my information is always out there. I welcome people to contact me at any time. I'm good at being civil and being able to talk to people even when we disagree on the issues. I will commit to attend all the meetings, and I believe I have the requisite experience. I've participated in many bylaws debates over the course of the conventions I've attended, in every national convention since the early 90s. And I would be honored and appreciative of your support. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, thank you.
May I ask an identity?
I'm pretty sure it's Diaz, but you can ask.
Area code 603, will you please let me know your name?
Yep, this is Spencer Diaz.
Okay,
Diaz.
and
Sorry.
also Mr. Sarwark, Andy Craig has joined. He's
Okay.
also an applicant, and so is
Got
Mr.
it.
Diaz.
Okay, so Mr. Dias and Mr. Craig, since you just joined, the procedure we're following is I'm going in reverse alphabetical order. People who have applied for the committee have up to 2 minutes, but are not required to use all of their 2 minutes to make their presentation. And then we will go to discussion with the LNC members about all the applicants from that point. So When you're not being recognized, you'll probably be muted. And it looks like Mr. Wendt has also joined the meeting. I see. Yep. Okay. So I will go back, and since we are trying to do a reverse alphabetical, to Mr. Wendt. And you have 2 minutes, Mr. Wendt. If you have audio, Mr. Wendt.
I don't believe he does.
Okay, so we're gonna go past that. We'll move on. I will then next go to Ms. Sexton.
Can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. So as everyone else has said, obviously you have read my application in the folder. I would like to be on this committee because of the fact that I feel that I can bring in a different perspective on either withstanding and holding the bylaws that I feel that are very important to our party, but then also reviewing over any that anybody feels that might need to be changed. I'm very objective and I tend to listen to everyone's point of view, no matter how quote unquote wrong or right some people may think they are. So I'd like y'all to consider me. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sexton. Next, I have Dr. Moulton, and then on deck, Ms. Matson. So go ahead, Dr. Moulton.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I've served 5 terms on the Bylaws Committee in the past, including a term as chair of the Bylaws Committee. I'm a 2-term chair of the Judicial Committee. I've chaired the Libertarian parties of Virginia and Pennsylvania. I spent 2 terms on the LNC, including the term as vice chair. I have a PhD in economics and a JD. I'm trained in Robert's Rules. I work well with others. I'm a bylaws geek, and I'm good at perfecting proposals. And I don't vote factionally. I just vote the best way. I don't know how to explain it. I try to be fair to everyone and just try to make the bylaws better. So I hope I can earn your vote. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. Next, Ms. Matson, and then on deck, I believe I have Ms. Harlos.
Okay. I think most of you know me pretty well. I don't think I need to do much self-introduction. I have a long track record as a particularly productive committee member. Many of you know I've been tied up the past few months with a petition drive, but the reason we did the drive this early, one of the reasons, is to have free time as we lead up to convention, and I want to take on projects like this. So we're turning in our petitions on Monday, and then I will return to normal schedule. I do bring a lot of institutional knowledge of things that have been real problems over the years, what roads we've been down before and what worked and what didn't. I am certified as a professional registered parliamentarian, and even with proposals that come from other people, one of the skills that I bring to the table is, helping avoid contradictions with other bylaws because I know them really well, minimizing unintended consequences. I advocate for using really clear language so it avoids the need for interpretation and argument down the road. And because those things can be as difficult to deal with as the original problem we were trying to solve. So those are the extra skills that I bring, and I thank you for your consideration and ask for your vote.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matson. I did misspeak. The next person is going to be Mr. Longstreth. Before Mr. Longstreth goes, I'm going to ask Mr. Dias and Starchild to use the mute buttons on your phones, just because there's background noise, and then unmute when you are called on. All right, so Mr. Longstreth, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my peers for hearing me. I'll keep this very brief. Appreciate the opportunity here. What I bring to the table is many years of organizational work and structuring bylaws and constitutions and that sort of thing, dating back to my late teens in college. I restructured many different constitutions, bylaws, and that sort of thing. And within the Libertarian Party, as my application pointed out, I have a lot of several years of experience on the Colorado Bylaws Committee and Constitution and Bylaws Committee, as well as several other technical committees when it comes to writing and that sort of thing. So what I would bring to the table is somebody who has demonstrated an ability to build bridges with all sides in order to come up with good solutions, who can take a step back and work towards that goal, and somebody who also has experience in this role, having chaired several Constitution Bylaws committees in the past, just not at the national level. So I know what it takes and how important compromise and discussion can be in order to make sure that the right things are presented to the body when we get to convention. So with that, I'd appreciate your support, and if you have any questions, feel free to message me off this call, and I'll be happy to answer this.
All right. Ms. Harlos will be up next, then Mr. Dias. Go ahead, Ms. Harlos.
Okay, I was just making sure you weren't saying anything else. And I put my encyclopedia in the packet, and I'm sure you all had just had wonderful time reading that. And like Ms. Mattson, there's very important historical perspective to be brought. And while I might not have personally been there, I have done a lot of studying of what the issues have been. And in working a lot with Colorado, I have found that some of the biggest problems come when suggestions come through and people don't realize how what sounds good has caused problems in the past, and maybe the way to work around them. And also I have a very high awareness of whether we want to admit it or not, we're a very factional party. And I have a lot of awareness of the sensitivities of all of them, not just the ones that I'm particularly keen on, and will bring up when I see that this will have the unintended consequence of causing some kind of split. And I do have a proven track record of always wanting to work intrafactionally, as Mr. Bishop Henchman and I did last time, where we both aided each other in getting something that was important to different points of view passed. And I even spoke on behalf of Mr. Bishop Henchman's proposal. And in that regard, I think I would be valuable. And while I know there may be some objection to having the current secretary be on either committee, Ms. Mattson has served in the past very, very well on multiple committees. And I actually think it's a bonus, because people with the background of either being a current secretary or a past secretary have certain procedural knowledge that is very, very important to these committees. And I think that is more helpful as long as the person believes they can handle the task. I really do object when other people decide for others what's too much work. If we believe in personal responsibility, we need to trust everyone not to apply for something that they don't think they can handle. And I would appreciate your vote very much. It would mean very much to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlos. I have next Mr. Dias, and then on deck, Mr. Craig. So Mr. Dias, go ahead.
In my hand right here, I have my National Party membership card. It says right here, January 7th, 2017. While it's not that long ago that I joined National Party, I was also only 17 years old when I joined. And as I talk to you right now, I'm only 19. So when I were to come onto this committee, or when I do, that is, I do believe I would bring a much more useful way of thought to the Bylaws Committee. Here in New Hampshire, I've been on the Bylaws Committee for multiple years, if I'm not mistaken. It says on LPedia as well. I think this last time around, at least, I was the chair of the Bylaws Committee, and I believe I joined also in 2017. While on that committee, I have learned a lot about what to do and what not to do and how libertarians like to bicker over the smallest of things, which can be a good thing, especially when we're talking about the federal government. But when it comes to party politics, sometimes we need to really think about our actions before we put something to the bylaws, because it'll be brought up and it'll be scrutinized heavily. So if brought onto this committee, I do believe I will bring more integrity and, again, a youthful way of a perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dias. I have Mr. Craig next, then Mr. Bishop Henchman on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Teensy bit louder if you can, but I can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, excellent. Well, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I know most of y'all, but just for the ones I haven't met yet, my name's Andy Craig. I've run twice as a candidate of Libertarian for Secretary of State in Congress in Wisconsin. I ran the Milwaukee County Party for several years and was the Secretary of the Wisconsin Party. And I last year had the pleasure of serving on both the Platform and Bylaws Committees, where we got a lot of good work done, and I was able to author some proposals that ended up getting adopted by the convention. Recently, I moved here to DC, where I started a job at a think tank as a staff writer, and so I don't have any particular big overhauls or anything. I think a lot of our bylaws structure, works and is time tested, and people are generally satisfied. But my focus will be, as it was last time, on making sure any proposals that we do have for changes are tightly drafted with clear wording and follow kind of, clarity for being able to be interpreted and followed, and not too rambling or anything. So that's why I put in to apply this time, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Next, I have Mr. Bishop Henchman, and then on deck, we'll come back around to Mr. Wendt if the audio issues are taken care of. Go ahead, Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Yes, thank you. Along with Dr. Moulton and Mr. Craig, we were the swing vote on the last Bylaws Committee. And so we got kind of inundated with dozens and dozens of proposals, and I think we did a good job analyzing them and then sorting them through. 2 months before the convention, our chair resigned, and I ended up being elected as the new chair, and kind of had to catch up on a lot of work that we had fallen behind on, soliciting public feedback, getting comments. We had 1,408 comments submitted, and I read them all and worked with the members of the committee to develop 20 amendments to incorporate that feedback. And we got, I think 19 of those 20 passed through committee. And then ultimately the convention floor approved 9 bylaws changes. I think this time the focus will be on our internal election system, although, I'm sure good ideas will bubble up for other things. And I'll bring a critical eye and try to get feedback as much as we can on good proposals if I'm given the privilege to serve again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop Henchman. Mr. Wendt, if you're still on the call and if your audio's working, if you can unmute yourself, you have 2 minutes. And your showing is still muted in the participants screen. Ms. Harlos, if you can manually unmute Mr. Wendt to see. Mr. Wendt, are you there?
I am here.
All right, go ahead.
All right, I appreciate first time using this app, so it's a little.
It is an adventure for all of us, trust me.
All right, so I do appreciate being given the opportunity to speak to the LNC. What I propose and why I applied for the Bylaws Committee is because I do believe that I have the skill set that is most well suited for the party in general. I've been the chair of the Montana Libertarian Party. I recently gave up that position in July of this year. I'm currently the Montana Political Director, so my job is to basically recruit candidates and coordinate political efforts but my strength is in organizational management. I've served on nonprofit boards for the past 5-6 years. I helped redraft the Montana bylaws. I helped create a template set of bylaws to be used throughout Montana. And what I really hope to accomplish is to represent the will of the membership of the party. I have no factional ties or anything along those lines. To hope that you seriously consider my application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. All right. Is there anyone else on the call who has applied for the committee that I have not called on? I don't believe there is, but I figured I would ask in case I missed somebody tabbing between my desktops. So hearing none, we will then move into discussion of applicants. I know that a couple of LNC members have made email pitches for various people and the reasoning. I think that it would be appropriate at this point for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so to recognize members of the committee who want to advocate on behalf of particular applicants, especially those who may not have been able to join our call tonight for scheduling reasons or any other. And so if you could, if you're on the app and you can hit the hand raise button, that will help me try and keep people in order. The other thing is I am not inclined to recognize people more than once, at least until I've recognized everybody else. This is kind of like in a in-person meeting. So try and hit all the points you have at the beginning. If there's time, we'll come back around to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. I see Ms. Harlos with a human hand and Mr. O'Donnell with a little blue hand, and then Ms. Van Horn, and then Mr. Hagan. So Ms. Harlos, go ahead, and then O'Donnell, Van Horn, Hagan, and Phillips. Go ahead, Ms. Harlos.
I'm not going to re-speak again for anyone who's already had a chance to speak for, even though, you know, I absolutely advocate. I would like to speak actually for Mr. Mike Seebeck, who wasn't able to be here this evening. I've worked with him multiple times on many bylaws committees, and it is one of his strengths. And he's also very, very detail oriented and a workhorse. And the committee would be very well served by putting him on. I know I am definitely going to be voting for him, and I would ask the rest of the committee to do so as well.
All right, is that it, Ms. Harlos?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak on behalf of Mr. David Blau of Massachusetts, who wasn't able to join the call tonight. When I was with the Massachusetts party, Mr. Blau was alternating back and forth as a chair of the party, secretary of the party, and the state party. And he's very meticulous, detail-oriented. He himself is a patent lawyer by trade, and he's been involved in the national party for a very long time. He's done his own stint on the LNC in the past. He's always been somebody I could go to for help with details and issues when I had issues with bylaws in Massachusetts, and he was pretty integral to sorting out the two-party issue under their state election law and drafting the bylaws and how the two organizations work so well together in Massachusetts. And I think he brings perspective of a smaller state, more of detail-oriented kind of perspective to the committee, and I will handily be supporting him for the committee, and I would ask that others do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Ms. Van Horn, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, everyone that spoke on behalf of themselves did a great job, by the way. So those are all good people. The two people I'm going to speak on behalf of aren't not on this call, and they're from Region 3. One is Mark Rutherford. He is a former LNC member. He is a lawyer. He has served on various committees. He is extremely even-tempered and good, easy to get along with. I think also on the email list, Joe wrote a little bit about him. You know, he's attended every convention since 2000, served on multiple nonprofit boards. He has a law practice where he does documents. He also is appointed to the our Indiana Commission, which I think is like Lawyer Defense League or something like that.
Public Defender Commission.
Public Defender Commission. Thank you, Nick. So yeah, so he has some public recognition and works with. He was appointed to that committee because he's able to be a bipartisan glue between the left and the right, or the Republicans, Democrats there, and get along with everybody. He was elected to chair that commission, I might add. He's a good choice. The other person is Chris Wiest. He is the Kentucky chair right now for the Libertarian Party. He is very good at moderating and negotiating. He has done cases on behalf of Libertarian Party members, and very successfully, I might add. He has applied for the committee. He would be an excellent choice. He's also a lawyer. I would hope you guys would consider either of those two people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Horn. We were joined by someone with a 919 area code. Can you identify yourself?
Yeah, sorry, that's me, Susan Hogarth.
Okay. Ms. Hogarth, you're not an applicant, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Wait, which committee are we talking about?
Bylaws.
Yep, no.
Okay. All right. That was all I needed to ask. Next on deck, I have Mr. Hagan, Mr. Phillips, and then Dr. Lark. Mr. Hagan, go ahead. And
I was also going to mention Mark Rutherford, but Ms. Van Horn beat me to that. He'd be good. Bring institutional knowledge, despite being a lawyer, that part thing.
It is a curse that we bear, and we bear it well.
And the other person, like you consider, is Alex DeBenedito. He's moved to Arizona, but has served as a Nevada executive director, and was my campaign manager when I ran for U.S. Senate last year. And he's wrote up a great campaign plan. Will do a lot of hard worker, smart guy. I think would be good on the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Mr. Phillips, go ahead.
Everybody's talked about good people and how we've got and all their abilities to work with other people and all that. And I'm actually going to speak up for a completely different kind of person, somebody who I've butted heads with several times. But I'm going to recommend Joe Burns. I'm going to recommend him simply because committees like this also need somebody that is detail oriented, but is going to buck the system a little bit and have a little fire in their belly and go after some of the points. And too often we focus on, hey, everybody needs to work together, and yeah, that's true, we do need to work together, but we also need to be able to have that oppositional spirit as well. So I'm going to speak up for Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Next I have, with his hand raised in the app, Dr. Lark. If there's anyone else who wants to speak, please raise your hand in the app. If you're not in the app, I'll ask again after we're done going through the people on deck. So go ahead, Dr. Lark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first of all would like to say I think that we have many outstanding candidates for the Bylaws Committee. There are many people whom I shall be delighted to support. I'd like to endorse the comments of my distinguished colleague, Mr. O'Donnell, regarding Mr. Blau, and my distinguished colleague, Ms. Van Horn, regarding Mr. Rutherford. I'll also note that I intend to support Chris Crawford. I think I've known Ms. Crawford since I was gathering petition signatures in the People's Republic of Massachusetts back in 1988. She was just an extraordinarily nice person with whom to deal. I think that she would bring a great deal to the Bylaws Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Lark. Mr. Ford has raised his hand. Mr. Ford, you are next. Go ahead. Or sorry, you are up, I should say. And Mr. Ford, I believe you are muted at this time. Ms. Harlos, can you help Mr. Ford unmute himself?
It's not letting me. Is he doing it at the same time?
Perhaps. All right. What we will do is I will go next to Mr. Redpath, and then I'll come back to Mr. Ford, and we'll get that technical difficulty resolved. Mr. Redpath, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to also speak on behalf of Chris Crawford. Dr. Lark summarized my thoughts very adequately, and I just wanted to say I will ask, among others, among 4 others, or whatever I'm trying to say, I will also be asking to vote for Chris Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Redpath. I believe Mr. Ford has probably bounced off and will bounce back on to get the technical difficulty resolved. Is there anyone who is an LNC member or alternate who is on the phone, who is not able to use the hand raising function in the Zoom meeting, who would like to speak?
Yes, I would, this Sam.
Mr. Goldstein, go ahead.
Yeah, for some reason I don't get a hand raised, but I would just echo those who've spoken for Mark Rutherford. I was his vice chair for several terms while he was chair of the Indiana Party. He has a extremely good in-depth knowledge of the way the party functions at all levels. He has served as prior as both, I think, our regional rep and also for sure as vice chair of the party. I'm going to vote for Mark, and I hope many others will.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Anyone else who would like to be recognized whose app hand raising function did not work? I'm just looking through to see if there's any more hands. I don't see any more hands. I believe we've been through everybody who is an applicant. We've been everybody who is seeking to be recognized, with the exception of Mr. Ford, who I will assume is dealing with the audio difficulties, which I've had to do myself, so I'm very sympathetic to that. Is there anyone else who would like to engage in any further discussion at this point while we wait for Mr. Ford to reconnect?
I have questions for the chair that are of a
Go ahead, Ms. Harlos. This would be a good time.
Okay. In the voting, can people select as many as they want, or is it up to 10?
So typically, approval voting does not have a limit on the number that you can vote for. Additionally, we have a standing majority requirement that derives from Roberts. And so if we have an automatic system like OPA-Vote to do the balloting, not limiting the number of people makes it more likely, I believe, that more applicants will get a majority.
Agreed.
I'm going to be editorial for just a moment, if you'll indulge me. My preference for these kind of elections is pick up to 10, because then you definitely get a majority because you don't allow people to vote. Approval voting, I don't think works well for multi-member. That's a personal tick. So take that for what it is. If you're doing approval voting, I don't think limiting the number of people you approve of is helpful at all. It actually defeats the nature of that voting method. So as a parliamentary answer, I do not think we are limited in the number of people we vote for in the approval voting system, nor should the OPA vote ballot be set up to limit the number of people. It appears Mr. Ford is back and ready to take his time. Go ahead, Mr. Ford, and I'm glad you're back with us.
And thank you very much. Briefly, a number of great people have mentioned, certainly Mr. Blau and Ms. Crawford from Massachusetts, Mr. Burns would be a notable addition. Three people I'd like to focus on briefly. Mr. Longstreet, who I've had the opportunity to work with in committee, and I have found him to be an outstanding participant. Mr. Rutherford, who is somewhat legendary for able to bring people together, let's just say. And
hold on one second. Mr. Hewitt, did you just mute yourself really quick?
What's that? No, I think I did. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Can you mute yourself, sir?
Oh, sure. There you go.
Not quite. There we go. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Yes, again, Mr. Rutherford, I think, is somewhat legendary for bringing people of a variety of viewpoints together into the Big L Big Tent. And of course, you know, as someone who I've got to know as a result of his petition drive work personally, and have sat on street corners and beaches and signed petitions with, of course, is Chris Thrasher, who I'd like to commend to attention. All the folks listed are great, but this is going to be a tough choice. But those are some of the people that I'd like to point out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Dr. Lark has his hands raised. Go ahead, Dr. Lark.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since this was touched upon, albeit somewhat obliquely in a previous comment, I think it is worth reminding that when we elect the members of the Bylaws and Rules Committee, that no more than 5 LNC members can be elected to serve.
That is correct. I believe the way we would resolve that, should we elect more than 5, is the lowest vote getting LNC member would get dropped, and the next highest vote getting non-LNC member would be added, assuming we're like right on the edge. But if I'm wrong about how we would handle that, I am willing to be corrected. I know Ms. Harlos has her hand up.
My hand wasn't up on, it's a related issue, but not the exact one.
Okay, but is there anyone who thinks that that's incorrect as far as the limit of 5 LNC members? That's how I would propose to handle it, is just by an automatic dropping off, assuming that there are, say, 6 LNC members elected, the 6th one gets dropped and the next non-LNC member gets added. Dr. Lark, do you think that will deal with it?
Mr. Chairman, in the absence, I don't know of a previous situation where I don't recall a previous situation where that arose, but that strikes me as the reasonable approach. I'm not sure if there's a problem with Roberts, but it strikes me as certainly a reasonable approach.
Okay. Ms. Harlos, your hand is up.
Have we decided how many alternates we will be electing? And then that raises the issue of, does that 5 LNC include alternates?
If somebody can cut and paste 11.2, if you have the bylaws up in front of you, the actual text of 11.2, if I just have it in front of me, I will have a better answer.
I'm doing that right now.
Yep. Alternates will be counted to the 5 based on that reading. Or that's my interpretation of that language, is that alternates are members of the current national committee vis-a-vis.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
Okay. Well, no, I'm answering Mr. Hagan's question. Mr. Hagan had asked in the chat about the 5 from the LNC, whether or not that includes alternates or not.
Oh, okay. Mine was a little different.
Okay, so let me answer Mr. Hagan's. The alternates, I believe, or sorry, my interpretation of that bylaw that was copied and pasted for me, thank you everybody, is that the 5 LNC member limit will include both LNC regionals, officers, as at-larges, and alternates. So it's any of the 25 people who could be on the LNC, only 5 of them can be on the Bylaws Committee. That's how I read that bylaw. What was your question, Ms. Harlos?
The Bylaw Committee alternates.
Bylaw Committee alternates.
So if we
That's this 11.5 that Mr. Bishop Henchman just put in the chat?
One moment. Yes. So let's say there's 5 LNC members on the committee. Does that mean no LNC member can be an alternate?
It does not.
Okay.
But, and
I know I think I'm going to agree.
You know exactly what I'm going to say.
Yes. They can only fill a vacancy.
They have to pay attention. If we end up with 5 LNC members or alternates on the committee, and then we end up with an LNC member or alternate as a ranked alternate for the committee, then at any meeting at which there is an absence from one of the initial 10, or an absence from one of the LNC, from one of the Bylaws Committee members, the Bylaws Committee would have to pay attention to whether or not they had gone over their 5 limit. Does that make sense?
So at any one time, there cannot be more than 5 voting members of the Bylaws Committee that are LNC members.
Correct.
Got it.
And Ms. Mattson and Mr. Longstreth have the same instinct that I do, really, which is let's see what the vote looks like and figure out whether or not this is a real problem.
And how many ranked alternates are we intending, or is that will be decided later?
The total committee size is what, 10?
Yes, sir.
If the total committee size is 10, I mean, we only did 2 alternates for a 12-person murder jury. So I think we can nominate as many as we want, but they are ranked, and I don't anticipate more than 2 to 4 of them being able to be used. So we could make 100, but the likelihood is that the only top 2 or 3 will be able to be on the committee.
My suggestion, Mr. Chair, is 2.
And okay, so Ms. Harlow suggests 2. Ms. Adams points out that more than 4 seems redundant. And then Ms. Mattson says, you know, this is also something that can be informed by the results we get from the vote. If there are, say, 3 or 7 who have the same vote totals, we can rank them that way or something.
I agree with Ms. Mattson.
Pardon me, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
Dr. Lark.
Just to, in case it may come up, I would assume that the issue of election of alternates would also be under the constraint that such alternates need to have a majority. Is that correct?
I believe they would, because an alternate can step into the position of the committee member and have the power to do the things that Roberts otherwise requires somebody to have a majority for. And so to avoid
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with you, and I think your reasoning is appropriate. I thought it was appropriate to raise that issue now rather than wrangling with it later.
Thank you so much. All right, so we've heard from everyone who is on the call who wants to be on the committee, as far as I know. We've heard from all of the members or alternates of the committee who I have heard seeking to be recognized to advocate for any members. Is there any further discussion before Ms. Harlos would send out the ballot? I see Mr. Goldstein and then Ms. Harlos.
I would like the committee to consider some time limit of some type for this first ballot, be it 15, 20 minutes after it pops into our email boxes, so we don't drag this out for the rest of the evening. Because Oprah vote figures the totals right away, so we don't have to worry about time for counting or anything, correct?
Correct. So what I would suggest is assuming for a second that your question's answered fairly quickly and Ms. Harlos does not have something super detailed, I would anticipate the ballot will go out by 6:45 Eastern time. And I would say that all votes should be due by 7 p.m. As Ms. Adams recommended in the chat. And then we will basically be at ease from 6:45 to 7 for people to submit their votes. And I would come back at 7 or maybe 5 minutes prior to make sure everyone had voted who wanted to vote. And if anyone is having trouble, that we were able to resolve those difficulties such as we can. That way at 7 or 7:05, we could then address if we have any issues with alternates, a need for a second ballot, things of that nature inside the time allotted for this meeting. Does that work for you, Mr. Goldstein?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Ms. Harlos, go ahead.
I would just like to read off the names that I'm sending ballots to make sure I have everybody, and I am sending to their lp.org email addresses, if you would allow me.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have the chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary. Joshua Smith, Bill Redpath, Alicia Mattson, Sam Goldstein, Joe Bishop Henchman, Richard Longstreth, Victoria Page Sexton, Elizabeth Van Horn, Jeffrey Hewitt, Jim Lark, Whitney Billieu, Justin O'Donnell, and John Phillips. Did I miss anyone?
Dr. Lark?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that the LNC should express its appreciation to those members who are applicants and who took the time and trouble to be with us this evening. More generally, I think we should thank all of those who were gracious enough to volunteer to serve on this committee.
Thank you, Dr. Lark. That's definitely appropriate. Thank you to everyone who applied. All right, I did not see anybody raising their hand to suggest any different procedure than we discussed, or that anyone was missed on the list that Ms. Harlos had said. So Ms. Harlos, go ahead and send out the ballots.
Okay.
Mr. Hewitt, were you seeking to be recognized or not? No, okay. It's a good thing I'm a good lip reader, because I wasn't going to unmute you.
And what was the time limit, Mr. Chair?
7 p.m. Eastern, and I will come back. I mean, we'll be basically at ease until 7 p.m. Eastern. I will come back about 6:55 and ask you, Ms. Harlos, who has not voted, and then announce that, because my goal is to have everyone vote who wants to.
And if everyone, I'm going to put my phone number in chat. If anyone has difficulties while voting, I can look at the console for OpaVote and help you out. So just jot this down and give me a call if you, oh, I did it to Nick privately. 1 second, let me put it to the whole group. So that way I can help you.
All right, so voting will be open now. Ms. Harlos will send out the ballots. Please complete your ballot within the next 10 minutes. At 6:55, I will come on after consulting with Ms. Harlos and identify anyone who has not been able to vote and make sure that we can try and get as many votes as possible and make sure everyone gets a chance to be heard.
In my experience, our LP email can be a little slow. It may take 5 minutes to come through, and check your spam.
It just came through already, Karen.
For the ones that have a forward, the chair, all the officer ones take forever. I don't know why. But be sure to check your spam if you do not have it yet. In about 5 minutes, in other words. Thank you.
All right, we are at ease until 6:55 p.m. Eastern time. All right, so it is 10 minutes after 7 or 11 after 7. We're having a little bit of email stuff, although not more than I would actually anticipate. I mean, I guess a lot of these things, like everything in life, is all about your expectations. And I seldom expect things to go smoothly. So at 7:15, I will inquire of Ms. Harlos, who has not been able to vote. In between now and 7:15, if you have not received a ballot, feel free and send a text or a private message to Ms. Harlos to try and figure out a way to do it. And then we will
just got
get stuff done. Okay. So I figured that gives us another 4 minutes to either converse with Ms. Harlos, double check or triple check your spam folder, hit the refresh on your email, go grab a beer if you're so inclined. And I don't know why you would be with how smooth everything's gone, but that's what you're into. And then at 7:15, I will ask again. I'm actually going to step away from the computer for a couple minutes. So if you say anything important, I didn't hear it.
I'm stepping away for about 5 minutes too to get a glass of wine. I'm going to look at the voting list. I'm going to read off who it says voted to make sure we have everybody. I have Alex, Alicia, Bill, myself, Nick, Elizabeth, Jeffrey, Jim, Joe, John, Joshua, Justin, Richard, Sam, Tim, Paige, and Whitney. Did I miss anyone?
Yep.
Okay, so now let me go hit stop voting so it'll give me the results.
Can you just share the screen, Karen Ann, or is there private stuff on there that we can't see?
Oh, there's no private stuff on there, so I didn't hit stop yet. Let me share the screen here. To figure out where that's
I mean,
at.
you don't have to. That'll be easier than you reading it. Although
Yes.
I guess Mr. Bishop Henchman and Starchild and some others are on the phone, so I'll read them anyway.
Yeah, but if there's any, like, it's easier for you to see it than for me to explain. So here's y'all should be seeing my screen. And I'm going to hit stop voting. Results and ballots. Okay. Where's it? Does it give us the numbers?
It's down at the bottom.
So what is a majority?
A majority of 17 is going to be 9.
9. So it looks like the ones that have exceeded 9 are Mr. Bishop Henchman, Andy Craig, Chris Crawford, Richard Longstreth, Alicia Matson, Chuck Moulton. How many do I have there? Because it's 3.
That's six. That's 6 so far.
Dr.
7.
Olson.
Dr. Olson, Mr. Rutherford.
I think it says it at the bottom who they are in ranked order.
No, but I didn't tell it how many to elect, so it elected everybody. 10. So there's a tie between Ms. Sexton and Mr. Thrasher. So let's count again here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well,
9 and 10.
9 and
We're
10.
done.
Now, how many LNC members?
Yep. So if you scroll down to the list of winners, they'll be in rank order by the number of votes. They should, wait, no, they're not.
No, they're not.
Never mind. Yeah. So we have on the LNC, you have Sexton, Bishop Henchman, Matson.
It looks like we have exactly 5, Mr. Chairman.
That's perfect, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, accidents occasionally happen.
It has been known to be. And so we are now at the position of we can do one of two things to proceed. We can either resolve the question of ranked alternates on this call. We can, Ms. Harlos, if you could just scroll up and down kind of slowly on that bar chart, just because I want to get a visual. Okay, go on down.
Okay, no one else got a majority out of the people that got votes.
Correct. Just scroll a little bit. I'm just looking for approximately how many were reasonably close to the majority, but not quite. I see Mr. Blau looks very close. Keep going. Mr. Levasseur, about what, 7? Is Levasseur 7 or 8?
7.
7. Okay. Keep going. Weiss looks like an 8 or a 9.
8.
Okay. So it looks like Weiss, Levasseur go up. Keep going. How many did Di Benedetto get?
7.
Also 7. Okay. Levasseur and Di Benedetto are the same, 7. And Blau is an 8.
Yeah, so it looks like Weiss and Blau would be the next 2.
Weiss and Blau are the next 2. Di Benedetto and Levasseur are the next 2 after that. And then everyone else is pretty much, well, I mean,
yeah.
So that's the top 4 runners up. I would think that setting those 4 as the alternates in rank order, I mean, that could be resolved off this call if we want, but that provides 4 alternates for 10 positions, or we could just take the top 2. Mr. Bishop Henchman, are you seeking to be recognized or just not muted?
Oh, sorry. Let me mute myself.
No, I just, it shows up in my thing.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead,
if I may
Dr.
make
Mark.
a suggestion.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is first to inquire would there be any objection, since we did set a majority here, and since we have a point concerning Roberts. I'll defer to Ms. Mattson if she wishes to offer a comment. I would first ask if there are any objections, say, to taking the 4 people who were not elected but received at least 7 votes, to see if there would be any objection to seating any one of those people as an alternate. Should there be no objection, then I think you could propose or have a proposal to seat them in order of the number of votes they received, and you can break ties randomly. But I think it would be first and best to inquire of Ms. Mattson if there would be a problem with respect to Roberts in doing this.
Ms. Mattson?
Now, if there's a separate vote, for what to do in phase 2, and there's a majority vote for that, that suffices for attaining a majority.
Thank you, Ms. Mattson.
But the question, it would be easier. So I guess the question is, do we need to have a separate vote to approve, assuming there is no objection to any of those 4?
Well, no objection is a majority.
Right. So that would be considered to be the separate vote, is my inquiry about whether or not there's an objection to those 4.
No objection is a very speedy vote.
Okay. Is there any objection to that procedure?
Remind us again who the next 4 are.
The next 4 are Blau, I believe it's
Wiest.
Blau, Wiest, Di Benedetto, and Levasseur.
Mr. Chairman, I believe he pronounces it Levasseur, although I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure either, and I live literally on the French side of Manchester now, and everything's in French, including St. Marie's across the street and Chez Vachon down the road, and I still don't know how that name is pronounced.
Oh, merde.
I had breakfast at Chez Vachon this morning, and people were ordering in French.
It's such good breakfast, too. So is there any objection to those 4 people who received 7 or more votes being the alternates and rank order by their vote totals?
But there's ties. Just
with the ties being resolved randomly. Hearing no objection.
And how would we conduct the random at the meeting, at coin toss, or
no? I'll coin toss it. I'll coin toss it right now.
Okay.
I mean, well, crap. I'm not. I had a coin in my pocket and I took it out when I got back from lunch. Does anyone have a coin handy?
I have a pile of coins here.
All right, Mr. Bishop Henchman. The first one will be resolving. I believe it's Wiest and Blau are 8. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So Blau will be heads. Wiest will be tails. Please flip, Mr. Bishop Henchman.
All right. And see if I can do it where you can all hear it. It is tails. So whoever that was.
Who is that?
That was we.
All right. So
so Wiest is the first alternate. Blau is the second.
Correct. Now we move to Di Benedetto and Levasseur, or however it is pronounced properly. Sean. Sean will be tails and Di Benedetto will be heads. Go ahead and flip again, Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Head.
Di Benedetto wins that one. So Di Benedetto and then Sean. So the order will be Wiest, Blau, Di Benedetto, and Levasseur. All right. Is there any other business for us to resolve at this meeting?
Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Mattson pointed out we need to appoint an interim chair of the committee as well.
Sorry, I was not looking at the chat. Good call. Is there any objection? Who is the highest vote getter, Ms. Harlos?
It looks like Mark Rutherford.
Down to 58.
Is
Yes.
there any objection to appointing Mr. Rutherford interim chair? Hearing no objection to appointing Mr. Rutherford interim chair, he will be appointed interim chair until the first meeting of the Bylaws Committee, at which point the committee itself may decide their permanent chair. Now the question is there any further business for our meeting to resolve?
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Redpath. I would move to suspend the rules for a 5-minute discussion on the LAX versus Reno matter.
The what?
Next meet, the February.
Super Bowl weekend LNC meeting in person in either Vegas, either Reno or Los Angeles.
Is there any objection to allowing a 5-minute discussion for that? Dr. Lark, I see your hand up.
No, I was going to simply ask, Mr. Chairman, that once again, we thank those who sought positions here and also those who were gracious enough to join us at our meeting today.
Yes, thank you to all of you. Ms. Mattson, is that an objection hand or a different hand?
It's not an objection to taking up the subject, but first, can we just read through again the list of the 10, because between the scrolling screens, it was hard to grab it all.
Right.
Although I presume Ms. Harless will send us a list, but can we just kind of read through the 10?
I will email out the actual ballots and that pie chart or bar chart like within 5 minutes.
Okay.
But can you read the 10?
Oh, 1 second. Let me
and
go.
then the 4 alternates.
Okay. The 10 is Mr. Bishop Henchman, Mr. Craig, Ms. Crawford, Mr. Longstreth, Ms. Mattson, Dr. Moulton, Dr. Olson, Mr. Rutherford, Ms. Sexton, and Mr. Thrasher. The alternates are Mr. Wiest, Mr. Blau, Mr. Di Benedetto, and Mr. Levasseur.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Redpath, go ahead.
Well, it seems to me that I think Reno won the voting in the informal overvote. Mr. Goldstein brought up the airfare situation, that it was cheaper to fly into Los Angeles than Reno. I checked airfares. It looks like it's $100 more expensive for a round trip from Chicago to Reno than a trip from Chicago to Los Angeles and back. So I don't know how quickly we want to resolve this, but I don't know if other people checked, but I was thinking that maybe we could reach some agreement here as to the location on this conference call.
This is for the February meeting?
This is for February 1 and 2.
I would suggest that this discussion be postponed to our meeting in Miami, only because we're now 5 minutes over our timeline.
Okay.
And I think it's more substantive.
Okay.
Now, let me just contradict myself for a moment. I know that part of the reason Robert wanted to do that vote was because some of those facilities will withdraw their proposals at some point. I'm not sure. Go ahead, Mr. Redpath. Do you have like a proposal one way or the other, or just you want to raise the issue?
I just wanted to raise the issue and just state that $100 isn't that big of a difference, but maybe people got different results from different cities. I just wanted to put it out there for discussion.
Can I interject something here real quick?
Go ahead, Mr. Goldstein.
I think that Robert put the Reno facility in, and as well as Indianapolis, because there might be a possibility we might be hearing presentations from those two places in November and for the 2022 convention. And if it just so happens that Reno loses, they may not want us there at the February meeting if they don't get the 2022 convention.
Yeah, Ms. Mattson made the same point. Now, what I will tell you is that can be handled in two different ways, and I don't know as we're going to resolve this, because there's a couple of countervailing things happening right now, right? Reno wants our business for the 22 convention. Reno is going to present in November. We have to book our February meeting. They may be willing to give us really good rates because they think that we may give them the 22 convention. We can choose to resolve the 22 site selection in November. We can also choose to punt the 22 site selection to the February meeting. There's a lot of, I feel like there's more moving parts here than would be easy to resolve. If Mr. Kraus sets the meeting prior to our November meeting in Miami, the contract will hold for the LNC meeting in Reno, even if we were to tell the Reno site facility in Miami, we're not coming to Reno for 2022. We'd be locked in. If we don't decide prior to Reno giving their presentation, they may withdraw the bid. This is all a little bit up in the air. My inclination from the way the vote went on the OPA vote, from my understanding, is to just pick Reno because it was the overwhelming favorite. Dr. Lark, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually, I think that, first of all, your point is correct that if Mr. Kraus can negotiate a contract with the venue in Reno, that contract will hold up whatever we choose to do, unless these people are really stupid. The other point I was going to make is that the fact that we may not choose them for the 2022 convention does not mean that we could not point out to.
Or you want me to bring it to you?
Sorry, Sam didn't mute himself. Go ahead.
It does not mean that we might not choose to go there perhaps for some sort of convocation, some sort of non-convention event. So I would think they might be keen to have us there, even if they don't receive the award of the 2022 convention. The Libertarian Party sponsors all sorts of activities. The Libertarian Party, other Libertarian state parties may want to book this facility. So even if we're not awarding them the 2022 convention, I think that we can point out to them that it would be useful to them if we come out and take a peek at their site.
Yeah, I mean, is there anyone else who wants to be recognized on this issue?
One other point, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Redpath raised the issue. I was actually surprised that the rate for flying from Charlottesville International Airport, probably the world's 1 millionth largest airport, the flight costs to LAX and to Reno were essentially the same.
And I think, was the room rate in Reno better than the one in LAX? Or was it a wash?
It was significantly
it's quite a bit cheaper in
Yeah,
Reno.
Reno is quite a bit cheaper.
Okay.
Also quite a bit colder.
So that's the thing is, you know, it's, I hate the fruit comparison because you can compare fruit even if they aren't the same fruit, but it is kind of, there are different metrics. You know, it's apples to oranges a little bit. Like I said, my inclination is to set February for Reno, absent a real strong objection. I appreciate some of the other moving pieces, but I think setting it and getting it done prior to our meeting in Miami gives us the maximum flexibility. And with that, is there anyone else who wants to be recognized on this issue? And is there any further business for this meeting? And hearing none of those two, thank you to everybody for taking time out of your weekend to attend to our business. Thank you to everyone who applied for the Bylaws Committee. Thank you to everyone who is willing to serve on the Bylaws Committee. And my apologies for going 12 minutes over. If there is no, Mr. Bishop Henchman has his hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Sorry, is someone sending a message to both the the applicants who were elected and the ones who were not, just letting them know?
Yes, I take care of that.
Ms. Harlos does that.
Perfect.
All right. And give a pat on the head to Magic for me, Mr. Bishop Henchman. And with that, we will be adjourned.
Go National.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At 5:42 Mountain.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.